We are talking about one of the most beautiful countries in the entire world, and that is the country of Poland. Poland is the Eastern European country that sits right beside the Baltic Sea, and as of 2010, it is a country that has over 38 million people stretched out over a landscape of 312,679 square kilometers. This makes the country have 123 people per square kilometer. Now, the one thing that I didn't know about Poland is that apparently if you call somebody a Polak, it's a really offensive term. I didn't really know that. I always thought it was kind of like just slang for being like, hey, you're a Polish person. But apparently it is a very derogative and negative offensive term towards Polish people. But if you want a short term for a Polish person, you either call them Polish or a Pole. Now, even though some Polish people may take offense to this word, the country is made up of great people who strive for a better future. And Poland itself is a country that has a really extensive history, just like most of the countries that we do talk about. But with this history, it's got great moments and also really sad moments. For example, the people of Poland are really excited to celebrate their independence. Now, this happened on November 11th, 1918, when they declared themselves their own republic from Russia. And throughout the Second World War, this Day of Independence was banned in 1939 because of German influence within the country. And even though the Germans got their butt kicked in World War II, their independence wasn't celebrated again until 1989 when the communist government was kicked out. Which is kind of fascinating to me because I didn't think that Poland was going to be communist after the war. And speaking of history, we'll dive more into that into a future episode. But for now, let's just talk about some really cool facts about the country itself. For example, Poland has some many interesting features about the country. Many of you may picture Poland and see it as a lowlands or plains and not very mountainous. But in fact, that's absolutely incorrect because, well, Poland down to the southern regions has a lot of mountains. These are the Carpathian and Sudet mountain ranges, and the two highest are the Tatras mountains, and the tallest of the Tatras mountains that's in Poland is the Rysy mountain, coming in at 2,503 meters tall or 8,212 feet. It is a great place to climb and hike, except for it is closed from November 1st to June 15th, which makes sense because of the winter seasons. Now let's step away from nature for just a sec and let's talk about Polish culture. First of all, the capital of Poland is Warsaw, and out of all the cities, it is the largest city with a population of 1.8 million people. It was founded in 1200 AD, with the St. John's Archcathedral Church in Warsaw being one of the oldest cathedrals in the city, and it is so old that it is considered a UNESCO site. And speaking of city ages, Gdansk has over 460,000 people, and it is one of, if not the oldest major city within Poland. Being founded in 997 AD by Mieszko I of Poland, who is the ruler of the Poles in 960. And when we think of Poland, we might think of Polish beer or vodka or just having drinks in Poland for a good time. And not saying that the Poles are a bunch of drunks, but like us Canadians, over here we do enjoy a good bevy. But as for alcohol, they estimate that a Polish person drinks 92 liters of beer a year. And for their drinking laws, you have to be over 18 years old to legally purchase alcohol, but keep in mind that's just purchase because I couldn't find anything that stated whether or not it was legal for people under the age of 18 to drink alcohol. But on top of that, if you drank in the streets of Poland or the parks of Poland, it would be considered illegal. Considering we're on the topic of drinking, we might as well talk about smoking, because smoking is banned in indoor restaurants, workplaces, indoor public places, and of course you have to be 18 years old to do that as well. And the one thing that smoking and drinking have in common is that they are related to the healthcare system. The healthcare system in Poland is free for everyone and is provided by the National Health Fund. However, if you want free healthcare, you have to be insured, and that's usually done by an employer. Now, there are also private healthcare systems where citizens have to pay full amounts, but as their constitution, it states that everyone is entitled to healthcare. And in 2013, a study found out that 61% of citizens have used private healthcare, as well as 91% of pregnant women. Now let's jump back to a little more culture, because one thing that's fascinating about Poland is that it has 14 UNESCO or UNESCO zones. Excluding the entire town of Warsaw, which is an entire site, the country has a range from cities to structures to churches to forests, and many of these places remind us of the great amazing story of the country. But unfortunately, one of these places has a story of darkness and regret. This is because one of the UNSCO zones within Poland is the Auschwitz concentration camp. Now, I'm not gonna lie, guys, I had totally forgotten that Auschwitz was in Poland. I always thought it was in Germany, but I guess I was wrong. During the Second World War, there were 3 major concentration camps, Auschwitz 1, 2, and 3. As well, they had 45 other satellite camps around the area. And this was Germany's final solution to the Jew question, which resulted in the extermination of millions of Jewish people. As a matter of fact, these concentration camps were pretty much a prison for 1.3 million Jews. And throughout the entire genocide of the Second World War, these particular concentration camps contributed to the deaths of 1.1 million Jewish people. And they believe that Auschwitz was responsible for killing 1 out of 6 Jews that were murdered throughout the entire Holocaust. But however, the Soviets managed to find Auschwitz and freed the people on January 7th, 1945, making it International Holocaust Remembrance Day. And you may wonder, why is this place a UNSCO zone if it's such a very dark spot in our history, one that we would probably rather forget? Well, in 1947, Poland founded the Auschwitz-Birkenau State Museum, and by 1979, the camp was inscribed because although there may have been terrible moments in history, it reminds us to move forward and never return to these terrible times. But today, Poland stands as a very interesting country, as they contribute to peacekeeping missions, joining NATO on March 12th of 1999. They've also joined in relief operations in Iraq and even Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan. And throughout the years, Poland has been moving forward to recognize individual thought and progress. As in 1989, it held its first free elections in over 40 years, thus bringing in a non-communist government. As well as one thing that's really interesting about Poland is they have 17 Nobel Prize winners. Their first one was in 1903, which Maria Curie won for physics. And on top of that, she even won a second time in 1911 for chemistry. And out of all these 17 Nobel Prizes, 4 of them are for peace. One thing that's really interesting about the Polish is that they have 32 letters in their alphabet. Although the alphabet is based off of a Latin alphabet, they have multiple accents and some letters that look like English ones, but actually sound very different. For example, W sounds more like a V. Have you ever heard of KGHM? Well, probably not if you're from another country, but one thing that's interesting about this Polish company is it is a copper and silver production company that employs 34,000 people around the world, and although it is owned by 32% of the government, it ranks as 10th in the world when it comes to providing copper for the entire planet. Either way, Poland remains a cool and interesting country to visit. There may be a lot of places to go, but let's not forget their food, which they're famous for pastries and pierogies, but there's also many historical buildings and amazing places to get in touch with nature, such as the Wrocław Zoo. It is also a place that is home to over 250 castles. That's a lot. And because of these amazing places, in 2013, they had over 15 million visitors come into the country. And as of today, Poland is the 17th most visited country in the entire world. Poland, a country that is not only amazing, but has a cool history and people that are moving forward with great progress. We said that the word Polak is a derogative term for Polish people. It's actually offensive in the United States. So if you're from Poland, but you're living in the United States, some people in the States that are Polish do not like being called a Polak. I don't know why, it's the way it is. As stated, it is a country of progress. And one thing, for example, is that Poland is aiming to have great renewable energy. And they are aiming to have 15% of their total energy provided by renewable energy. And this is all aimed for the year 2020. However, in 2015, 10% of their energy was provided by renewable energy sources. Now, the thing about Poland, it doesn't have any nuclear capability when it comes to its power. Although in the 1980s, they had 4 nuclear plants in development, these were ultimately canceled because of a public opinion after the Chernobyl accident in 1986. But as of recently, the country has reevaluated its need for nuclear power and is hoping to have their first nuclear power plant up and running by 2021. But as of today, most of the energy is provided by coal. And this makes Poland the 9th largest coal user of any country in the entire world, and even second following Germany in all of Europe. Of course, using coal might not be really good for the environment, and one thing we should probably talk about is the environment. For example, the longest and largest river in Poland is the Vistula River. It comes in at 1,047 kilometers long, and it goes right through the entire country from its southern mountains, emptying all out into the Baltic Sea. Now, this river wasn't always called Vistula, it had some name changes throughout history. For example, in 40 AD it was called Pomponius Mela, and although this valley has been around for over 2 million years, ever since people have been in the region, it has always been a major artery for trade. Now, Poland has always been known for its cars. Well, at least when it comes to its economy, as its automotive industry makes up about 11% of the country's economy. But in 2007 to 2009, they were the second largest producer of light vehicles in East and Central Europe. And in 2013, they were the 23rd largest car creators in the world. And one thing to note, the company called Ursus, which generally makes tractors, was the first car company in the country, being founded in 1893. You know, considering we're also talking about inventions and cars and all this sort of stuff, did you guys know that the father of modern day rocket science was born in Poland? Theoretically. Okay, if we were to go by today's standards, it would be in Poland, but Werner von Braun, the man who helped build the V-2 rockets for the Germans during the Second World War, which was the real beginning movement for rockets to be used to go to space. He was born in Wierzitz, Germany on March 23, 1912. However, the German name was changed to Wierzich in 1919, which is now located in Poland. So have any of you guys ever heard of the Bledo Desert? Neither have I until reading about it. This is a desert located in Poland. That's right, even though Poland is a country that has a lot of green land and doesn't seem like a place that would have a desert, it actually does. This is the largest collection of sand in all of Central Europe, stretching out over 32 kilometers, and unlike other deserts, this one was definitely not created naturally. The sands that go 40 to 70 meters deep are a result of humans lowering the water table to such a high amount that vegetation has had a hard time to grow back. So if we're going to talk about land, we should probably talk about how Poland has 16 voivodeships. So what is a voivodeship? Well, basically they are provinces or states. However, the country always didn't have just 16 voivodeships. In the last 200 years, it's changed consecutively. Before 1795, Poland had been divided up into 4 different divisions. They were Great Poland, Lesser Poland, the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, and the Duchy of Livonia. And within those 4 different sections, Poland had 41 voivodeships. That's insane. However, from 1816 to 1837, there were only 8. From 1921 to 1939, there were 16. And the biggest was 1975 to 1998, where Poland had 49 of these provinces. But now, as of 1999, it's just back to good old-fashioned 16. So one thing that Poland is really happy to have in its country is Malbork Castle. This castle was created in 1406 and is a UNESCO zone as of 1997. This medieval castle is not only the biggest brick castle, but is the largest castle in the world by land area. It was built by the Teutonic Knights, who were German Roman Catholic Crusaders. It is said that this was home to 3,000 knights who lived across the 52-hectare site. And throughout history, it has seen many battles and has had multiple repairs. And throughout the Second World War, she was a benchmark and blueprint for German Nazi castles under Adolf Hitler's regime. But in the modern day, this is one of the most visited sites in all of Poland, as she is one of Poland's great heritage sites, and in 2016, they finally repaired the Blessed Virgin Mary Church, which was destroyed from a battle during the Second World War. And not only is it the biggest brick castle, but it's also the largest brick building in all of Europe. Now, one thing that I really do love about the Polish people is they like to do things different from, well, my country of Canada and probably even your country as well. And within the culture, they do have really interesting moments which we should probably look at. For example, let's look at the Marzana Festival. This is where people gather around on the first day of spring to burn or drown a straw doll. And since the 11th century, people have been burning this straw figure wrapped in canvas in order to make spring come faster. Very much like Groundhog Day in North America, it is a fun and celebrated time of year throughout the country, even though people don't really think that if you burn a doll, spring will come faster. Also, speaking about traditions, let's talk about food, because the people of Poland are known for their food. It's so good. Kanapki is a popular food that you would eat in the country. Now, most of us throughout the world like sandwiches, and when we talk about sandwiches, we think of bread, meat, and more bread. Right? But in Poland, if you actually get one of these, you might not get 2 pieces of bread. Instead, you'll pretty much just get an open sandwich. It's pretty popular there, and yeah, you might need a fork or knife to eat. And of course, we cannot forget about pierogies. Personally, I love them. My mom hates them, but oh, they're just so good. Now, if you've never had one, well, first of all, you're missing out. But basically, they are a delicious dumpling that you can get filled with cheese or potato. In Poland, they date back to the 17th century, as this food was a diet staple for the people of the country. And they are so popular that in the city of Krakow, they have their own pierogi festival. I should also mention that considering I'm from Canada, living in Ontario near Toronto, I should mention that Toronto has its very own Polish festival. It is known as the Roncesvalles Polish Festival, and it is the largest Polish street festival in all of North America. And I wanted to mention that because, yeah, you can get pierogis there just as well. They're so good. And one other thing to mention, which might be strange for some, is that on Christmas, pierogis are a traditional addition to the Christmas Eve meal. Now, pierogis, you have many different ways that you can prepare these, but for Christmas, there's only two real ways that you should do it. And that is to have two types, one filled with sauerkraut and dried mushroom, and the other just filled with mushroom, and it comes with clear borscht. So we've talked about land, we've talked about food, but what about art and cinema? Well, that's a very important thing to the Polish people as well. Now, cinema does make up for a lot of countries' culture, and for Poland, a lot of their films may not be in the limelight to most European or American films, but they've also made some really good contributions to the film industry. You could say that the city of Łódź is the cinema capital of Poland, sometimes being called Hollywoods. It is home to the first cinema, which was created in 1899, and is also home to the Museum of Cinematography. But as for film, the first filmmaker from Poland was Kazimierz Poroziński, who is known for shooting documentaries, but he's also known as an inventor. Because this Polish inventor created one of the first ever movie cameras, being called the Pleograph, which was built in 1894. And before we get out of here, guys, I gotta mention one last thing because, you know what, we gotta talk about astronauts. Miroslav Hermaszewski. This man is the first, and to this day, only ever Polish person to go into space. Now, he was born on September 15th, 1941. And in the 1970s, out of 500 pilots from Poland, he was chosen to go into space, spending 8 days on the Soviet space station Salyut 6 on June 27th, 1978. This is Poland, a beautiful country that is just plain awesome. With a lot of great opportunity, like many other countries, there is much more than what it appears to be. A home of great traditions, a country that works well with its neighbors, this is the culture and people and country of Poland. A place that is filled with excitement, hope, and love.